Technology Council's Coffee Q&A. We try and do these once a month, a casual conversation with a tech leader in our community. As many of you know, I work on the Blue Economy Project at the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce, and my colleague Leslie Ann McGee is our guest today. But not wearing her Blue Economy hat. Leslie Ann is the Director of Special Projects at the Hole Oceanographic Institution, was recently at the COP27, the
Conference of the Parties,
the UN's climate event in Sharm El Sheikh, Egypt. Tens of thousands of people attended, and WHOI had what was known as the Ocean Pavilion there in partnership with some other organizations around the world. And Leslie Ann was the key organizer of the pavilion, putting this together. She's got a great background, former head CZM for Massachusetts, was one of the instigators for putting together DunkWorks at WHOI, the prototyping lab at WHOI. Leslie Ann, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here today. I did want to note that one of our partner organizations, the Scientific Center of Monaco, is here. Hervé is one of the participants. I just noted that he joined in. I couldn't say the Scientific Center of Monaco in French because I would botch it, but Hervé is here, and I'm sure he could give some perspective as well. I thought this morning I might just take you through a quick picture show, and then we can have a conversation about what we saw there. Again, as Bert says, I'm at Hole Oceanographic. I was asked to run the first ever Ocean Pavilion in the Blue Zone. Let me just share my screen here, if Bert will allow me to. Let's see here. Wait a second.
Should have power in.
I do. Whoops. I'm going to minimize you all. So just quickly, I wanted to give you a glance into our COP27 efforts. Many of you know that the Conference of the Parties have been meeting now for a number of years. They sequentially number their meetings. This was the 27th meeting, although that's not exactly accurate. But this one was in Sharm El Sheikh, Egypt, which is on the southern Sinai Peninsula. COPs, as many of you know, have been the result of COPs have been a number of different global climate treaties, such as the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Climate Accord, and major things happen at COPs. The parties get together and they discuss and negotiate how we're going to manage climate change globally. They're also an opportunity for organizations around the world to share their science on climate and their policy approaches to climate. There are two zones at a COP. One is a blue zone, which is where all the governments are, and the other is the green zone, which is where most of the NGOs and some of the other organizations are. The green zones are generally wide open. They're open to the public. You don't need really much accreditation to get in, whereas a blue zone has a very restrictive accreditation process, generally restricted for governments. They have started to open it up to other types of organizations that do really important work. We were one of them this year. We were lucky enough to get a spot in the blue zone. We were across the hall from Israel, next door to Korea, and to the left of us was Scotland. So you can see that our little ocean pavilion was squished in with all the other governments. We decided and were offered the spot to build an ocean pavilion with 62 days of planning. Mostly COPs pavilions are planned over a year. Ours was planned over the course of 62 days, which meant, as the project manager, for me, it was a sprint. We had 20 partner organizations, which I'll talk about in a minute. Let's see if I can advance the slides. So the key concept for us was to raise the profile of the ocean as a key solution to global climate change. This is the first time there's been an ocean pavilion in the blue zone ever at a COP. Typically, there's been a smaller version of one in the green zone, but to actually have the ocean as itself across the globe, 70% of the surface represented in the blue zone as part of the government interactions, was really a key change for a COP. And we were offered that slot to do that with very limited time to plan. So we will give you the quick tour. We had a number of Ocean Pavilion partner organizations. As I said, Hervé is on here. He's from the Monaco Scientific Center. Woods Hole Oceanographic and Scripps Institution of Oceanography were the lead partners on the Ocean Pavilion, with Woods Hole Oceanographic doing 90% or so of the planning and execution of the actual pavilion. There were a number of other organizations from around the world that participated with us on our partner list, which meant they helped contribute funds to build and operate this. Over the course of the 10-day period at COP, our Ocean Pavilion, the first ever one, received 15,000 visitors. We estimate. We thought that's not so bad for a first try. We held over 60 events with a bevy of VIP appearances, which I'll talk about in a minute. And we think, given our 62-day planning horizon, the idea that we could pull this off was a success. You ask most people, we're doing a survey right now, the responses have been, this has been a resounding success for a first attempt at this. When you ask about the events that we held, we again had 20 partners. We quickly opened a portal for presentations in our theater. Here's a quick picture of our theater. We received about 90 different submissions for panel events in our theater. We selected about 60 of them, mostly about 75% were led by one of our partner organizations. We combined partner organizations on like topics, and then we offered opportunities for others to participate and run events in our theater that were not partners. But they had to be accredited to be in the blue zone, which is not easy to get. So it was a limited amount of panels that we had, but we estimate we had over 15,000 visitors. This is just a quick picture of the WHOI team sitting at the hotel in Sharm El Sheikh, wondering how if we were actually going to be able to pull this off. We got in country about 3 or 4 days before the event because we actually had to oversee the build of the pavilion. We are confident we were going to do it, but who you see here is Peter Domenical, the president of WHOI, and a number of others who were key, some of our scientists, and even our security officer, because we needed to bring a security officer with us into the area. The key question for us is, can the ocean help us get out of the climate crisis? And that was the type of events that we were trying to hold at our pavilion to sort of show the world that what the science is being done, how the science interacts with the policy, and how the oceans are a key component of this climate solution package that the UN should be considering, and the Conference of the Parties should be considering as they think about climate solutions. So just a quick image here. So COP27 is held in a variety of countries. This year it was held in Egypt. Next year, COP28 will be held in Dubai. And the following year, it'll be held in Australia. So this is something that the world countries have committed to participating in every year to keep the climate discussion going. Just a quick picture of the entry of what COP looks like. The facility was a conference center in Sharm El Sheikh that was expanded significantly to accommodate the 50,000 participants at COP27. Some of these were temporary buildings. The logistics were very complicated. I would say that the Egyptian government and was not fully prepared for the number of people and the intensity of use that came to them on that date. There were a number of logistical issues with sewerage lines and food, and there were articles written about it that were noted in publications about how complicated the logistics were for them to pull off. Quick picture of inside COP. This is inside the blue zone. I just snapped a photo of a beautiful sunset. So a number of different organizations walking around, probably the first COP since COVID where folks were actually fully in person, which was wonderful. Last year, I believe they held it in a hybrid format. COP27 or any COP is a complicated endeavor for the UN to pull off. This is just a quick snapshot of the complex map. You can see there are multiple buildings. This is just the blue zone, by the way. There's a whole separate map for the green zone, which is across the street. One of the things that kind of turned us around a little bit is don't assume that because a building's blue, that means it's in the blue zone. The red building, the tan building, and the green buildings are all in the blue zone, and don't consider the green building as being part of the green zone because it's not, it's part of the blue zone. As you can well imagine, we were very confused, as were lots of folks, about how to navigate around COP, but just wanted to share with you a little of the backside. Many of you know there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals that the UN has. Number 14 is what we call the SDG, or the Sustainable Development Goal related to oceans, and it's called Life Below Water, and that was our focus. And many of you know the symbol of the Sustainable Development Goals is this beautiful rainbow image that they use under the letter O, and a lot of us, those pins are very coveted. So if you're able to capture an SDG pin, you've arrived at COP. We walked in about 3 days before the event started, to a pavilion that was barely built. And what was built was not built well. So myself and my AV person that I brought with me from WHOI tried frantically to get the Egyptian workforce and the vendors to actually build the pavilion to the specifications that we gave. That was very complicated. It didn't all work out. Everybody had to pitch in. I think I have a picture somewhere of our chief of advancement washing windows in the pavilion because whatever had to get done had to get done. I would say from a technology perspective, it was a failure, COP overall in general this year. Our AV system for our theater, where we held over 60 events, didn't work. They provided us with old equipment, technicians that didn't fully know how to operate it. And our AV person who tried desperately to make it work. And it was very complicated. We learned a lot of lessons about maybe we should bring our own equipment with us next time. So we're considering that, but the UN said we couldn't bring anything with us, so we didn't. But next year we're going to, because across the hall from us was the US Center, and they had brought all of their own AV equipment and their own AV staff. So something to learn. There were a lot of events in our theater. This is just a quick snapshot, and you might see a lot of people that you might know around here. There are quite a few people. There's the head of UNESCO is in this picture. The head of the National Oceanographic Center in England, Ocean Race is in this picture, AGU. This attracted a lot of different interested folks. What we realized after we built it was that our theater was not quite big enough, given the vast amount of interest in oceans and oceans as a climate solution. So you'll see standing room only in almost every one of our events. We did build the theater with some plexiglass in the back, so we had some headsets that you could stand outside and listen, but those headsets didn't actually work. They were provided by the vendor, and they didn't actually function. A number of different activities going on at the Ocean Pavilion. This is Peter Thompson, the UN Special Envoy for Oceans, being interviewed. I don't know by whom, but I thought I would throw this in there. We had to clear everybody out of the pavilion just to get his theater interview done. Here, lots of VIPs. This is a picture of President Biden. As you know, he came to COP to give a speech, not at the Ocean Pavilion, but he talked a lot about oceans. And I'll note that the background of his talk was the Sinai Peninsula and its ocean resources out in the Red Sea. John Kerry stopped by for 5 minutes and then ended up coming in our theater and giving a 25-minute talk, because he's really understanding now that oceans is a key climate solution. This is before he got COVID. And this is a picture of Peter Thompson again with the Pacific Islands Forum staff and delegation here. So very keenly interested in small island developing countries and the impacts of climate change. As many of you know, what came out of COP this year was some loss and damage language about compensating countries that really didn't have any contributions to global climate change, but are seeing the effects. This is was an interesting moment. I'll just share some of these backdoor moments with you. The woman with the tan blazer is Queen Sofia of Spain. She walked up to me in the pavilion when the pavilion was super, super busy one day, and I didn't know who she was. And she asked me if I could tell her about the pavilion, so I did. And then she asked me how I knew so much about the pavilion, and I told her, well, I'm kind of running the show here. and I still didn't know who she was. And her bodyguard mentioned, this is Her Royal Highness. And he said something, I didn't understand what he said. I did understand Her Royal Highness. So I quickly went over and got our president of WHOI, which is Peter Domenical, who's standing next to her, and said, we have Her Royal Highness here. And he said, of what? And I said, I think it might be Spain. And he's like, oh. So she was keen. She has a foundation that funds work on ocean plastics. She was lovely. And who you see also in the picture to the right of me is the First Lady of Uruguay, who was the Queen's traveling companion. So it was just very, very surreal, but a wonderful moment. This is Ed Markey. He's hamming it up with our student delegation. We brought students, both Scripps and WHOI, brought students from their PhD programs. He was working on taking a selfie of him and the students here. We had a number of local politicians come in. We had Senator Markey. We also had Senator Whitehouse from Rhode Island, and there were several others, but it was just neat to see how excited they were about the Ocean Pavilion. And most of these were stop-bys. We didn't actually fully know who was going to come by. Here is the Prince of Monaco coming by the Ocean Pavilion to talk to us. As you know, he's been very keenly interested in oceans and has done a lot of work in oceans. One of the most surreal interactions was Boris Johnson here, who came by, and he stayed for about 30 minutes and asked us all kinds of questions about oceans and why should we care about oceans and what do oceans really matter. And it was just very, very surreal. He was like a celebrity in some way. I personally thought his hair didn't look anywhere near as bad as it does sometimes on TV. But he was lovely. He had a lot of keen questions for us, and his advisors were listening. What that matters, I don't know, but I just thought it was a very interesting moment. And then, of course, the next day, the Daily Mail has their key article on Boris Johnson visiting the Ocean Pavilion here, and sort of the types of craziness that he attracted. So we became famous in the Daily Mail, which, as you know, is not too hard to do, but for us, we were very excited about it. We tried to build our pavilion so it was fun. This is our selfie wall. This is just me being a nut one day when work was getting really hard. We were trying to build this pavilion. WHOI did all of the creative work on the pavilion, all the design, all the branding, all the graphics. And so that was really neat to see it come to life in a 2D format on our walls. And people did stop by. Our selfie wall was right on the way to the bathroom, which is a key spot to have, is on the way to the bathroom. We had a lot of international exchange. This is me one night having a tea ceremony in the Niger pavilion. This is a gentleman from Niger. It was a very stressful day, and one of my colleagues said, maybe we should take a walk. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pavilions. It's always neat to walk around them. I was having a particularly difficult time at this point, especially with the AV problems that we were having. So we went over and had a tea ceremony with this gentleman from Niger, and he says that now my son and his son are connected for 40 years for every cup of tea that we share together. And it was a beautiful moment, and it just reminded me why we were there and what things I still had to learn about the world. We had lots of people come to our pavilion. This is one of our scientists, Chris Pykuch, who's been working on IPCC for a while, and Peter Hill, our government relations person. Everybody jumped in and took an active role in this pavilion. Even our president of WHOI here on the left, this is Peter Domenical. We had to bring in our own cleaning supplies because the pavilions weren't provided cleaning supplies. So this is him doing his part of the job and bringing the cleaning stuff through security, which we thought was great. And this is a picture on the bottom right of AGU, the American Geophysical Union president, and one of our key scientists, Susan Lozier, here cleaning the table in the conference room with the newly elected AGU president helping her on the right. Just goes to show that everybody had to pitch in to make this work. Our partners were fantastic in doing that, and everybody just kept a sense of humor. There was a lot of people in the world watching COP. This is the media pavilion. The reason why we walked through the media pavilion is because that was where one of the cleanest bathrooms was. So we would go through there on a regular basis and watch them, report on the news out of COP. It was, produced in the southern Sinai and Sharm El Sheikh. The northern Sinai Peninsula is a level 4 security zone, meaning we as most countries do not allow you to drive through the Sinai Peninsula. In fact, the only way we were allowed to get to the southern Sinai was by plane. The State Department does not allow you to drive into the southern Sinai through the northern Sinai because of all the ISIS and other activity up there. And I thought this picture was really key. This is a picture from my hotel balcony. What they did is in the desert, they had these gentlemen in suits standing in the middle of the desert every about 600 feet or so, watching the mountains behind us. They had built a 22-mile fence around Sharm El Sheikh, so folks in the northern Sinai couldn't get into the southern Sinai without significant accreditation. I just thought this picture was interesting because it was very surreal to see people standing out in the desert watching every day, all day. There were also hundreds of other pavilions. This is the Egyptian pavilion, not too far from us. I watched them hand paint this when the pavilions were being built. It was fascinating. It was stunningly beautiful. This is the US pavilion being built, and this was one of their comment walls. It's a quote by President Biden. This is one of my colleagues standing in front of that quote. Just a picture of how close we were to other government pavilions. You can see across the way is Israel. Down the corner was Canada, and they were key for us because they helped us find our coffee machine, which was very important at our pavilion. The Brazil Climate Action Hub, just another example of another pavilion. We walked around and looked at a lot of them to get ideas because we built ours not really knowing how to do it. It turned out to be a great design, but this was the World Health Organization. We couldn't figure out if this was supposed to be a tree or a tree representative of lungs, but we thought that the art that they brought in, and I don't even know how they got it there, to be their backdrop. This is a 3D structure that was inside their pavilion. Was just fascinating. We all agreed at the end, we think it's a pair of lungs because it was the World Health Organization. This is me at President Biden's keynote address, which was fascinating to participate in. You had to have a special accreditation to get into that. And that was really a neat event. Of course, we had to go out and ham it up a little bit. This is us over at the Nature Pavilion. I'm taking a VR tour of how Indigenous folks are actually better climate stewards than anybody else. And it was a tropical forest tour. It was absolutely fascinating. And this is Sam Harp next to me from WHOI. We were over there checking things out. Of course, you saw all kinds of crazy things walking around COP, like a blow up polar bear here, which I thought was interesting. So I snapped a picture. You can see to the left, this is actually the Egypt pavilion that I showed you earlier, now that's busy with activity. Some of the food, because you have to eat local cuisine, very heavily influenced by Mediterranean cuisine. This has a combination of chicken and pigeon in it and all kinds of fun things. I was absolutely fascinated that this guy could actually carry that many dishes at once. So I had to snap a picture of it. I know you think I'm nuts, but the things that you see in different cultures sometimes fascinate you. And he was sort of challenging himself to see how many plates that he could put on a platter and carry it. And it was remarkable. We had to remember that this was also about getting to know each other again. COVID has done, quite a number on all of our interpersonal relationships. And so we really tried to make sure that we took time to sort of talk to each other and get to know each other. And this is probably the one time that the catering actually showed up during COP. So we were really happy about it. We were having significant issues with catering as well, but we had a moment of fun, which was good. And then right after COP was over, I spent a half a day up in Cairo doing some quick tours, and that was just remarkable. And I just wanted to show you a little bit about what we did there. We do also have a website that we would love to show you real quick, and you can you can go there and check it out. I pulled it up this morning because here we go. So this is our Ocean Pavilion website. We are going to continue the branding and continue the name. It's oceanpavilion-cop.org. If anybody is interested in going to visit here, you can see information about why we're doing this on here. And then you can get information on all the partner organizations that participated. And each one of them, you can link off of here and find out more information about them. And I know some of you are interested in particular the types of talks and that we had and panels that we had at the Pavilion Theater. So you can actually scroll through here by date and you can see all of the talks that we and the panels that we held. There were a number of MOUs between partners signed and governments, which was really interesting. And in a lot of cases, you can watch the video of the actual panel or event that was in there. To be frank, the AV system was so poorly built that most of our live stream and our recordings are of not great quality, which we will fix next time around. But they are up there if you're interested. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions about my experience, about our experience, about anything that I just talked to you about.
Wow. Folks, if you have some questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat or just raise your hand and throw it out there. Leslie Ann, you said that this was put together in 60 days. When was you had you know, dozens of partners on this. How did that work? When you say 60 days, is that after all the partners agreed to do this, or was there also pulling partners together during that process?
So about 72 days out, the UN gave us the approval for the Ocean Pavilion, which you have to have. Mm-hmm. And at that point, we had WHOI, Scripps, and maybe 3 or 4 other partners who were key. We had to pay for this too, so we had to figure out how we were going to pay for this. Mm-hmm. We started maybe with 6 or 7 partners in August, and over time, other partners wanted to join as they heard about the approval of the Ocean Pavilion. So Rama, who was our head of delegation, started working with Scripps, the president, Margaret Lyon, there, and they started actually, talking to people who were interested. And over the course from August until the end of September, when I told them that we had to cut off partner lists, we went from about 7 partners to 20. And each partner had a different, interest, different contribution level, different willingness to or ability to pay. So we at the end of October, we cut off partners and we ended up with 20. So what we decided to do was we had 3 partner meetings that we had scheduled in October, where we, introduced all the partners, made sure we got, them to talk about why they were interested, what they were hoping to get out of it. And at the same time, we were developing the branding and the artwork and the design of the pavilion. So we were trying to sort of get them a little bit familiar with it. And then we opened the portal for 2 weeks so they could all contribute panel ideas. So it was, I don't think a sprint is probably the right way to put it. It was like shooting to the moon and back on a rocket strapped to our back. The partners, I would say, contributed considerably to getting essentially a 2-week conference programmed that quickly. That being said, they all had their own individual panelists, so we probably ended up with, I don't know, 800 participants at some point on panels. Wow. It was crazy.
Wow. All right, so we've got some questions. So let's do sure. Jane, Eldon, and Allison. Jane?
This is just fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing it. And I have to say, you don't know me, but I had 26 years in the Air Force. And one of the things the military does well is logistics, setting up different operations, not always for combat. A lot of times it's for humanitarian support. This kind of gave me PTSD for some of our deployments, because the key things that you talked about, the bathroom and the audiovisual, those 2 things jumped out at me. And those are things that you just about have to have a local contact on your own, or better bring your own, the audiovisual. But I just wanted to hear your impression. I think the media sometimes spins a very negative, oh, you know, nothing happened. Well, for goodness sakes, you had 50,000 very well qualified, interested people there networking. So if nothing else, I would guess that you've established some incredible relationships, you and the other participants, that going forward are going to be invaluable. And I just wonder if, you know, in the midst of all this chaos and scrambling and everything, that was sort of a key take home.
Yes, you know, it was interesting because it was, you know, simultaneously thousands of people sharing ideas and approaches with negotiations going on. And, you know, there are people, what I learned standing in the line for food was there are people that their entire career is centered around negotiating words. And so you had to kind of respect the fact that there were people holed up in rooms negotiating. At the same time, there were dozens and thousands of people actually sharing ideas. And somehow those two need to, you know, the UN tries to make those two things meet. And it was fascinating to watch. I completely agree with you. The relationships that we made are going to support ocean science and the intersection between ocean science and ocean policy and climate policy for a long time, but they're beginning of discussions. And I do remember where there was one panel that I sat in on of ours, and it was on ocean acidification. And I thought it was going to be a science panel. What do we know about ocean acidification? But what it ended up being was sort of a panel about how each different part of the world was considering ocean acidification and what public policy and what research support they were doing to answer it. And just by listening to those 7 or 8 different countries talk about how they were doing it, they got ideas from each other, you know, and that's the key to your point of making sure that people can interact and it's not just people in a room negotiating. Because as many of you know, a lot of the work that gets done in the hallways, you know, it gets done informally. And to actually have some of those informal conversations codified into MOUs that people are going to start actively working together was just wonderful to watch.
And just one more thing, that what you just shared, that anecdote about different places around the world sharing their approach. What happened to us in the military when we partnered on a humanitarian medical operation with coalition partners who didn't have the same economic and technical resources that we did, we realized that we could meet our standard of care. We could meet our goal for taking care of patients at a high quality way on a much, much lower budget, like 10% or less of what we were spending in the US. And when we came back home after an eye surgery mission, our OR nurse at the major teaching hospital in the Air Force began saving $4,000 a month on infection control that we were just sort of spendthrift because we had it. We were just doing way too much, and we could still do high quality US standard of care with much less. We learned, basically what I'm trying to say is we learned more from others than I think we taught them. And so these somewhat informal give and take settings can be invaluable. So thanks.
Sure.
Eldon.
Yes, thank you for that presentation. Your war stories of dealing with the vendors reminds me of years past doing trade shows when dealing with the hotel unions in New York City. But what I'm interested in is can you summarize, or is it possible to summarize the results of what's the role of technology in this? Is it just sensing, or is there something beyond that?
Yes, I mean, we on the ocean side, we especially at WHOI, and I love to get you connected. We have a number of ocean encounter events on these topics. But to your point is, we do a lot of ocean observing, but also we're starting programs now to do ocean vital signs, and to actually measure ocean vital signs around the world. And that is hugely heavy technology driven and dependent. You know, whether it's robotics or satellites, large data, you know, the ability to crunch large data. You know, we have to be able to collect large quantities of data and make it real-time information. And we're doing that on our Ocean Observing Initiative, many of you know. The role of technology, what I saw on our pavilion is pretty heavy. Whether, you know, it's integrating global climate models into global ocean models, whether it's figuring out, you know, how you get the right coverage of the Earth, interaction between land and sea. There's probably almost nothing that we can do without some level of technology, which was somewhat ironic because the level of technology that we had at our pavilion was about 10 years old. So we'll change that next time. But I think it's beyond just sensing. It's also the way that we crowdsource information, how we do citizen science, how that comes in through technology platforms, easily used, low cost, readily available technologies, how we use our industries around the world to gather information and to use that because they're, you know, out in the world a lot. For instance, you know, cargo vessels and things of that nature. So technology for us is a key part of the solution, and not just the solution, it's a key part of the way we understand the ocean. That's for sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
So Yuki Honjo from McLean Labs, which is one of our, you know, premier ocean science monitoring instrument companies in the region. She said that at an event a few years ago that Cape Cod is the epicenter of ocean robotics and technology. And I think that with your event at COP27, you know, we're certainly at the center of ocean science. Little old Cape Cod right out there. And Allison from McLean, you had a question.
I did, in a comment. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think your pictures are beautiful. And my jaw was dropping at how much you and your team accomplished with no infrastructure and no local help. It's truly incredible. I was wondering, in addition to bringing your own AV equipment next time, what's a key thing that you'll do differently?
Well, I will say that one of the key things that made us pull this off was actually one of our partners that was local. So for instance, the National Institute of Oceanography and Fisheries in Egypt was a partner of ours at the pavilion. They provided so much in-kind service on the ground that is a key takeaway for us. So for instance, they were translators. Most of the Egyptian workforce, they had a little bit of English, but it was mostly Arabic. And Google Translate only works so well and not so quickly. They also helped us with some logistics of shipping because frankly, the shipping process through the UN and their vendors is super complicated. So we shipped stuff to our local partner and they actually drove it over the Sinai Peninsula to our event. They would intervene a lot with us, with the UN at times when we just couldn't get things done. So that's a key takeaway from us. And that's probably one of the first things that we're going to do as we start to think about COP28 in Dubai, is making sure that our local partner, our local oceanographic institution, research institution is a key aspect of our planning process. Because frankly, without NIOF, as we call them, I'm not so sure we would have fully been able to pull this off. And they were lovely, and they were willing to step in at any moment. That's probably one of the key takeaways for us. Another part is funding. We were sort of simultaneously running and planning an event for which we hadn't taken in funds for yet. We were slowly taking in funds from the partners, but you were essentially running at risk on a project that was only 62 days long. You were estimating what things were going to cost, and so you were sort of digging a hole with the commitments that the partners were going to pay, and they did. But people kept asking me, well, how much is this going to cost? And I'm like, I don't know yet, because, you know, the other thing about we learned, and this is maybe, you know, the back, you know, beyond information, is that, you know, the UN selects all the vendors. So for those of you who talked about someone, I think it might have been Eldon that talked about trade show and trade show experience. We have a woman, our head of marketing at WHOI, worked at Teledyne for 25 years, and she ran their trade shows all over the world. And she helped me with the trade, this event. And she said, I've never seen anything like this, in terms of the poor quality of what you would get, the lack of communication. The UN selects the vendor, and the vendor is the vendor. So the vendor for who designs and builds it, there's one vendor. You can't shop it out. You can't put out an RFP and, you know, and get bids from different, you know, designers and builders. You don't get any choice of caterers. You don't get any choice of technology. You know, we hired 4 technology AV people for 2 weeks from a company that we didn't have a choice of. They never actually really showed up. And when they did show up, they would say, oh, I only do the camera. I don't know anything about the soundboard. And you're like, well, where's the sound person? Well, I don't know. He'll be by at some point. And you're like, okay, I need everybody. Like, and there was one night, not my proudest moment. There was one night at the end of the day, after 9 events in our theater, I actually made all the technology folks that we had hired stay in the theater. And I said, we're not going home until we fix this system. And we had to find their CEO. And he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, nobody's leaving until we fix this system. I'm like, we paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for this pavilion, and the AV is not working, and nobody's leaving. We would stay there till 10:30 at night. Oh, we'll find 2 microphones from Cairo. I'm like, we're not flying 2 microphones in from Cairo. There's thousands of microphones here. Find 2 that work. You know, so there was a lot of that going on. And, you know, we went over to the US Center and we had them come over and consult for us, you know, what's wrong? How do we get this to work? So the other key take home is maybe ignore the vendor that you have to use and reduce your risk by bringing in as much as you can ahead of time, and design it in a way. Our live stream never worked. Nobody's live stream ever worked because the bandwidth of the internet hubs that we each had, they were overwhelmed by the amount of volume that was being used by the, you know, hundreds and hundreds of pavilions. And even on top of the pavilions, there were plenaries. There had to have been 30 different plenary rooms that were also running events right around us. So in the middle of the day, you couldn't get internet. You know, between 10 and 5, there was no internet. So the idea of, you know, live streaming was just non-existent. How do we solve that problem? I'm not exactly sure. I'm hoping Dubai has a better infrastructure, because I'm not so sure we could have ever solved it in Egypt at that remote location. We did record. So that was a technology nightmare, because we had hard drives attached to the back of the cameras. And every night we had to download from the hard drive so that we could record the next day. The recordings weren't great. So there was a lot of technology lessons that we learned. And everybody else was having the same problem. So it wasn't just our pavilion, but the US pavilion, they had it working because they brought everything themselves. And the other thing I learned is don't build an AV room without a window in it. So our AV room was at the back of our theater. So I couldn't monitor what was going on in there. We'll build an AV room that actually has a window that we can see exactly what's going on in there all the time. And they can see what's going on in the theater. So those are some of the lessons we learned. That and bring your own food. That was definitely one. We had to bring our own food.
Wow.
We paid thousands and thousands of dollars for catering that didn't show up. So we ended up bringing food from our hotel.
And so Dubai is a go.
According to the president of WHOI, who made the announcement on day 2 of our event, we are a go for COP28 in Dubai.
Mm-hmm.
We are still wrapping up COP27 and doing lessons learned. But yes, we are a go for COP28, which is in late November next year. So hopefully with at least 10 months of planning, we'll solve a lot of these issues that we had. But for 62 days, I think we pulled off a miracle.
Wow. Other questions for Leslie Ann? Anybody? All right.
Oh,
Was it-
Eldon has a question. He
Oh,
just,
Eldon.
I think he's just on mute.
You're on mute, Eldon.
Eldon, you're on mute. I can't hear what you're asking me.
Thank you very much. I was.
Sure.
Yeah, just to follow up on your answer before, you talked about the gathering of information from various sources. Is there any centralization of making that information available on the cloud or whatever, so that a wide variety of people can access it?
Of data that might be collected in the ocean?
Right, yes.
There are, in the US, I mean, there's a very strong infrastructure for that. The OOS systems, or the ocean observing systems, that have centralized databases. NIRACUS, for instance, is the Northeast one. Ocean Observing Initiative at WHOI, that's all online. The global ocean observing systems, they're starting to work together, the different ones around the world, to integrate their data and serve it up. And I'm not an expert in that, though I know there's a lot of effort to have that information easily available to the public to use. But to your point, it is hard. It is hard to centralize the collection of all kinds of data from all kinds of investigations. And that is, how we can synergize our science and research is to do that. And I think the UN is working on that, as are others. It's mostly geographic based from what I see so far. For instance, the Arctic Council trying to centralize all the information about the Arctic. There's a lot of countries working in the Antarctic. They've done a lot of work to centralize their data. And the US around its different regions has done a lot of work to centralize their data as well. And I think looks like Allison and Bert have put some links into the chat for you to take a look at.
Thank you.
Oh, Jane's got another question.
Yeah, I am really excited about your main goal for being there and for educating everyone, and your comment about sort of the scientists and the NGOs and the green zone kind of people were in one area and the policy people were sitting in rooms talking. And I just wonder what was your sense, you and your partners, what was your sense of your priority getting to the policy side and the agreement side? And I'm sure you raised awareness tremendously, and I think it was a real coup to be in the blue zone for you with this.
Yes.
I mean, it's kind of appropriate, I think, but it's everybody thinks their topic should be in the blue zone, but for you to be there was a real opportunity to bring your mission statement to the awareness of the policymakers. And what do you have a sense of how that progressed?
I do. I don't have the actual language, but I know that Rama, who is our head of delegation, who sits in on negotiations, has done, there has been a big push to get oceans recognized in climate solutions. There's some language that was in the final negotiation package about the importance of oceans and ocean science and ocean research in policy decisions. So I think we're cracking the egg a little bit on that, which is great. I mean, if you think about it, the ocean itself has so many constituents and stakeholders, but nobody to represent it. And I think that that's what we feel that we had to do this time. I would argue that there are, well, what I shouldn't say, I would argue, I'll say that we saw other constituencies represented in the blue zone that are very important too. For instance, there was a youth and gender pavilion, which was key. There was a nature pavilion, which I think is also key. So I think that they're starting to sort of bring in key thrust areas into the blue zone so that it's not just, delineated by governmental boundaries, that discussions are occurring that are more topical than they are just geopolitical. And that was really heartening to me to walk around and see some of those other ones. And they might be right next door to, a country that's really important for that. I didn't see any logical placement. The Ukraine pavilion I thought was really interesting. That one was was funded externally, and it actually had information on it about the impacts of the war on their soil profiles, which I thought was really interesting, that they were sort of showing how geopolitical activities are impacting their ability to have a healthy environment and to contribute to global climate. But there was a lot of stories like that, not like Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine's a situation right now that's unique, but there were a lot of intersections between the geopolitics and the topics that are important for climate change there. So I do see the UN opening up. I'm not a longtime COP attendee. There were a lot of us who were. I do, the talk around it was good to see the UN starting to open up to different topics in the blue zone and not just governments.
That sounds great. That sounds like.
But that's my own personal observation, and I don't want to. It's not the institution's observation, or that's just what I saw as I walked around.
Right, but probably was the case that there were a lot of others like you that had that appreciation. I mean, maybe not everybody, but everybody comes with their own bias and their own blinders and perspective. But there probably were many others that were feeling that good cross-pollination, if you will.
It was also interesting, just to add to that quickly, that you could walk into any pavilion, and you could walk up to a participant or a pavilion lead or a scientist and just start talking about oceans. Or anybody from any other country could come in and stand at our ocean pavilion and say, "Tell me more." And that was the key aspect. The Chinese pavilion was a little more cordoned off. You had to have a mask and all these. They had a lot of restrictions, but on the whole, you could walk into any pavilion, look at like how they were serving up their data, what was important to them, what drives their economy, how they interact with climate, in the climate issues and climate solutions, and you could actually spark up a conversation, which was just different than any trade show I've ever been to. I wouldn't call this a trade show, but any sort of interaction I've been to.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I wonder how much overlap in your talks, all the talks that were given to your pavilion, did you have with World Health? I'm interested because I know World Health and many other health organizations consider climate change the biggest threat to human health in the world. It's also the biggest threat to national and international security because climate change is driving all this mass movement of populations. But the ocean has a chance to really solve a lot of problems that are secondary effects of climate change, like the food shortages and the getting more food from the ocean in a sustainable way. Was there much sort of crossover in your themes with health particularly?
So the UNFCCC does a really great job of centralizing a thematic calendar. It's called the UNFCCC Climate Action Calendar, and you can find it on COP27. And what it does is it takes each day of COP and it divides it up into topics. Oh. So one day might be youth and gender, one day might be science, one day might be health. And so what each of the pavilions generally try to do is align the talks or the panels or the activities for that day around the UNFCCC themes, and health is one of them. So to the best of our ability, given 62 days of planning, we tried to get the panels that were submitted sort of aligned with those UNFCCC themes. There's Climate Finance Day, and so we had most of our activities at our pavilion were about how do you fund ocean finance and blue economy issues and things of that nature. That being said, certain people come to COP for certain days and not others, so you have to realign when they're going to be there, when they're going to have their panel. That was really complicated. And I have to say no to people, which is okay, but sorry, we can't do it on that day because that's Youth and Gender Day. But yes, I think that from a health perspective, the UNFCCC does a great job of focusing that on certain days. And so then you can focus your programming around that. I wouldn't say that was a huge thrust of what we were doing this time around, just because of the lack of preparation time, but it's definitely a topic that we're keenly interested from the oceans.
Great, thank you.
Well, Leslie Ann, thank you so much. This was a fascinating conversation. Makes one proud to be from Cape Cod. And we look forward to COP28.
Yes, and please go on our website. There's you can join the contact list. You can find out more about what we're doing. And the website has a lot of information on it. If you sign up there, we'll be happy to, send you out information as we start planning for the next one. Just so you can see what's going on. We also did a day in the life at the pavilion who featured delegates and different talks and activities that were happening. So there's a lot of great material that we've produced from there in a very quick turnaround. I don't know how we did it. The people at WHOI are just remarkable. It takes a village. And all of our partners, were really, really supportive. They staffed the desk in the front. Every partner took shifts at the reception desk, which also got them to meet people. All the students staffed the theater so that we had theater hosts. I mean, it was definitely, it takes a village. And I don't know if I would change much of that because it got people very involved in the process. So I appreciate you giving me this opportunity. It was a whirlwind, but it was fun.
Thanks so much.
Yep.
All right, everybody, that's it for today. We'll see you hopefully live on January 6th at Cape Cod 5's HQ5 to learn more about the Cape Cod Climate Change Collaborative. And with that, I bid you a happy Friday and happy holidays to everybody.